Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from Portland, Oregon, USA. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique and one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And my guest this evening, Jim Robinson. I always mispronounce his name. He was on some years ago and I kept calling him Robinson, Robinson. And we have him on again because he's so interesting to talk about whatever it is he's interested in at the time. And last time, a couple of years ago, you're talking about the Portland Harbor, Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, Portland Harbor Superfund cleanup.
Yeah, and we did a good job with that.
Yeah, well, we had to really make sure that EPA put together a good plan for the cleanup. And it took a lot of work. We had a lot of people in the community working on it. The great thing is we had a couple thousand comments submitted to EPA about what should be done for the cleanup and that people really wanted to see a good, effective cleanup in the river, and it made a difference.
Made a difference?
Yeah.
You think our program had any help at all?
It probably educated more people, yeah.
I felt good doing it and
Yeah.
enjoyed hanging out with you for that hour. How you feeling right now?
Busy. But right now I'm trying to focus on healthcare for all Oregon and really trying to get that developed in terms of aside from my business work, trying to generate income. But when I'm able to volunteer time, I'm trying to focus on healthcare for all to get a healthcare system, universal healthcare system for us, because over the years I've just known way too many people who don't have any healthcare insurance, and they go through situations where they have health problems that they're trying to deal with, and they don't go see a doctor because they know they can't afford to pay the bill. They don't go to a hospital because they know they can't afford it. They get a prescription from the doctor and they can't afford the prescription, so they just don't fill it.
Well, some people say that they're this way because they decided to not take care of themselves or invest or do what's required in order to have the money to take care of themselves.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just people living their lives and people trying to work hard and earning a good income, but not able to afford health care.
Are we going to eventually have a health care as a human right?
I think we will eventually. We'll get there.
In my lifetime, Jim?
Hopefully.
Oh, God, I don't have that many years. Anyhow, I think so, yeah.
You'll still be around about another 20 or 30 years, right? 50? 50 years? Yeah, okay.
And I'm a little nervous because I had some stuff going on in the last week or so, a lot of stress, including getting a ticket for running a red light and having to go to traffic school, and those little things that aggravate if they accumulate now and then. So about every 5, 6 years or so, it seemed to have an increase in my usual level of a depressive personality, if I may, and I accept that. That's a reality. But now and then it goes beyond that, and thankfully it doesn't get to the level of major depression or serious or needing to be hospitalized again. So that's how I am.
Yeah.
And right now it's good to be in your presence because you're a pleasing and a pleasant person to hang with and just talk about things. So as you know, the first half of the show is going to be bio about who you are and details about your life, and so people get an idea where you're coming from and who you are. When you talk about important things and how you think. Yeah. Okay. And as you know, if I ask a question that you don't want to answer, you can tell me go get lost or whatever. Don't answer. So let's see. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Jim? Be your best friend. Jim is who or what? In your own words.
Maybe
Jim,
they'd say Jim is someone.
Be in the first person. Jim is pretend you're your best friend.
Okay, maybe.
First for it. Jim is.
Jim is someone who just wants to see things done right, and just wants to see people treated well. I mean, I don't know what people would really say. I know that one of the things I've always felt is that I want to see people treated justly. And that's been a driving factor for me the whole life growing up, was just wanting to see people treated fairly and justly. And
would your best friend see that in you?
Yeah. I mean, my friends would see in me, there are
It's designed to make you do what you're doing now.
Yeah. And I was talking to a couple friends of mine earlier today that I've known them both for years, and both of them, we work on stuff together because we have this trust, this knowledge, this loyalty to each other, but this trust of each other. And so they know that if they ask me for help, that I'll help. And if they really need something, they've got it. They've got my help. And if they want an honest answer, they get an honest answer. So it's kind of that trust of working together.
So Jim, I can trust Jim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How'd you get to be that way?
Maybe just from family, growing up, just seeing how people are treated. I probably got a lot of it from my grandparents on my mom's side, because I knew them, saw them a lot when I was growing up, and they always felt that people needed to be treated fairly, and people needed to be treated equally. And my grandparents, my grandmother was born in Hungary. My grandfather was born in Germany. And both of them came to, my grandmother, her family came to America when she was a baby. And she grew up here, but knowing family in Hungary. And after the 56 revolt in Hungary,
yes,
my grandmother spent a lot of time helping Hungarians get settled in the United States if they were trying to escape from communist regime in Hungary and come to America. And she helped them a lot with their translations that they needed in court to get citizenship and deal with issues. And so I saw that as a child growing up, that my grandmother did all this stuff to help people just because they needed the help.
Is that where you got that from, probably? Among other sources, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When were you born? What year?
64.
64. Why were you born?
Where?
Why?
Why?
Yes.
I don't know.
You never thought of it, huh?
Not
So
really.
think about it for a moment. Remember, I'm a psychologist. I sneak my hat on a little bit now and
My
then.
parents had plenty of kids. I was the 7th.
I was the 12th, so I know what you're talking about. So you don't know why you were born, huh?
But one of the things that's funny about that when
Sure.
when you're the younger child is
I was a baby.
they joke about that the first baby, the parents take thousands of pictures, right? Second baby, hundreds of pictures. Third one, as you're going down the line, they're taking fewer and fewer pictures of the child, right?
Is another one.
And by the time they get to me, they're just recycling the old pictures of my older siblings.
Well, he looks like that. Yeah. Do you have memories, the difference between you, being the youngest, and the older ones? Anything comes to mind at all?
Well, there were different experiences that we went through.
Sure.
Like for one thing, my oldest brother, when he graduated high school, he joined the Navy. He would have been drafted if he had not joined the Navy, and because at that time there was still the draft, the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So he's a Vietnam veteran, and it was good that he joined the Navy instead of being drafted, because being in the Navy, he was able to be on an aircraft carrier offshore from Vietnam instead of being on the ground in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So
You missed all of that?
there were different experiences because of when we grew up, where we grew up. I mean, because of the different times when we grew up. And so for me, being the youngest, my experience when I graduated high school was Ronald Reagan was president.
Ugh.
And yeah.
So, and where were you born?
In Washington, Renton, Washington.
Oh, Renton. Okay, yeah.
Up near Issaquah and Renton.
Oh, yeah. Interesting country up there.
Mm-hmm.
This whole Northwest of that.
Yeah.
Anything of significance about your racial or cultural heritage that would be of interest to the viewers?
Well, I don't know how much interest it is to the viewers. I've done a lot of genealogy research in my family history and tracked down a lot of the family. I felt real proud when I had identified that I know who all of my great-great-grandparents were.
Really?
Yeah. And so on my mom's side, my grandmother was from Hungary and my grandfather was from Germany. And so I was that part of the research, trying to find those families. And then on my dad's side, I think the most recent immigrant to America arrived around 1800, something like that. And I found our Robison line of the family, the Robison family, apparently settled in Pennsylvania with William Penn's settlement of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And arrived there in probably the late 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. You know, you have the two halves of the immigrant grandparents, and then the family that was here for a couple hundred years, for hundreds of years. So
That's matrilineal DNA, right? What about the other side?
well, we did the DNA. Well, my dad did DNA test, and found one of our, part of our ancestry comes from West Africa, and what we figured out, what I've determined, is that one of my great-great-great-grandparents, he was actually listed in the census in Pennsylvania in 1800 as free-colored. And so I don't know if he was descended from slaves who had been brought to America, or if he was descended from someone else who had arrived freely. But I know that he was in Pennsylvania in 1800. And the ancestry traces back to West Africa, around Togo, Benin, I think that's right.
Yeah, on the West Coast, yeah.
Yeah.
I have two of my daughters, I have 5 daughters, who are very interested in genealogy, particularly my oldest daughter, and she spends lots of time and money, Denise. And occasionally I'll ask her a provocative question to test whether or not there's any real validity in just this hard work and money you're spending. And she always has an answer for me. And anymore, she just laughs at me. And I boiled it down to me. She gives me all these charts, and she spends a lot of time. And I says, well, I'm going to simplify it. I don't know what I am nationality-wise through the years, but I know racially I'm red, white, and black. Not necessarily in that order, but that's what's there. You can see it. Yeah. A religious preference. Did you ever have a religious preference as a little boy?
Well,
or none?
My family attended, my grandmother attended church in the Renton Highlands, the Highland Community Non-Denominational Church. And
Christian.
So that was Christian. That was the one that we ended up going to, and we went to most of the time because that was my grandmother's church. And it was a church that she basically helped build, and our family helped build. And the interesting thing is, going through some of the family stories from my grandparents about how they developed their religious views. My grandmother was born into a family that was a Catholic family from Hungary, but they had kind of over time left the Catholic Church or changed. Some of them remained Catholic, some of them changed to, they had joined at one time. I know that by the time my great-grandparents died, they belonged to what was called the Hungarian Reformed Church in Cudahy, Wisconsin. And my grandmother talked about some of the different reasons why they had left the Catholic Church and simply became Christian. But one of the things that my grandmother had said too was she said that, you know, it really doesn't matter what religion someone is as long as they live their life right. And that was something that I always felt was it didn't matter what religion someone is as long as they live right and treat other people right.
Do you live right?
I try, yeah. And the important thing is treating other people right. And even if you don't treat yourself right, treat other people right.
Yeah, and from what I know about you, and my impression is that you do treat other people right, and that's probably why you are politically where you are on the political continuum, because we're still political animals, whether we admit it or not. Mm-hmm. Which brings to mind, on the political continuum, are you on the left or the right or the center or off either end or what?
Well, left.
Of course, I know what the answer is, but I had to ask it for the viewers' sake.
Although I used to, when I was in high school, I pushed I wrote letters to the editor a lot when I was in high school.
I could tell.
And after high school. But I was writing a lot about that I didn't call myself left or right or liberal or anything. I called myself a radical centrist. And the idea is that a radical centrist was someone who would achieve to find a balance between ideas on the left and right, but would be willing to take radical action to ensure that the balance comes about and that it works. And so you don't want to try to just leave things the way they are because that's the way they've been. You want to be willing to make changes.
Can you repeat that again? Define what a radical centrist is. I've never heard it put that way before, and it makes sense.
Yeah, so radical centrist being someone who works to achieve a balance between different views, different perspectives.
Sure.
Okay, achieve a balance, but be willing to take radical action to ensure that it comes about, because it's not radical in the sense of just overthrowing everything, but radical in the sense of being willing to make big changes. Like, for example, one reason that I work hard on getting single-payer health care is because we need major change in the way the healthcare system is in this country now. We need to be willing to make some radical changes. It's not really a left idea to have single-payer health care. It's really an idea of trying to figure out what works best for the American people. It just happens that it's basically liberals who are supporting it. You know, a lot of people on the right, when they look at how things work and how the funding comes together, how you make it really work, they'll support it. And for example, in Canada, if you go interview people in Canada, you find a lot of people who are conservative politicians in Canada strongly support Canada's Medicare system.
Which is socialist.
Yeah. Well, it's not socialist. Well, there's a good quote that a Canadian minister had said, that he said, we don't really think of it as a socialist system. We think of it as we don't think of it as socialist medicine. We think of it as social medicine.
You familiar with George Lakoff?
Yeah.
Don't think of that. I thought you might have. You got the kind of mind for that. I love him. Yeah. Do you practice? You have a religious preference nowadays? Did I ask you that? Okay. No. And your formal education, how much of that did you get?
I have a master's degree in public policy. Mm-hmm. From the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard.
I knew there was something else wrong with you. You're too smart. I'm just smart enough to know when I can recognize somebody who's as bright as you are. And I feel honored that I am good enough or smart enough to be able to hold a conversation with you and experience you as you're just happening to discover that you're not so full of yourself. You can be an ordinary citizen. Mm-hmm. Because an ordinary citizen are the ones that are most interesting, because they're going to relate to the world and to what's going on. in a basic fundamental sense to do with worthwhileness and okayness and feelings, yeah.
Yeah.
And they can listen to each other.
Well, you know, I gotta say, I really appreciate that you do these shows, because this is a great way for people to learn more about what's happening in public policy, what's happening in the world, and getting to know who people are who are out working on some of these issues and who their neighbors are.
Thank you.
Getting to know who's around in the community,
Yeah.
and getting to know a lot more about the issues that are being worked on.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a high stroke. I appreciate that. I never heard it put quite that way before. And you're betraying your brilliance. No, no, how smart you are. you do an IQ test. Have you had any of those?
No.
Yeah. So, you have a wife, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, or one of those?
Well, live with Ellen Eno.
Oh yes, it would.
Ellen, I think you've probably met her somewhere before.
I think so.
Various events.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long has that been going on? Short time, long time?
It depends on when you start counting.
Whenever you want to count.
Okay, we first met in college.
That's a while. Yeah. You like each other. Yeah.
For some reason we do.
Yeah. Any children or grandchildren?
No.
Yeah. And we have established that you're already a Trumpster, so we won't ask you about political persuasion. Here's one for you. I rarely ask this one. The difference between sympathy and empathy. Is there a difference between those two?
Yeah, there's a difference.
What's the difference in your opinion?
I could say maybe sympathy is I feel sorry for somebody, and empathy is yes, I know how you feel.
Yeah. Okay. You ever experience anybody who has EDD, empathy deficiency disorder? I just created that. Empathy deficiency disorder.
I don't know.
Somebody
if I
who seems to
have.
be a nice human being, but then if there's no depth to them because you expect them to linger a little longer. When I tell you about having lost my dog, and you say, "Oh yeah, I hear you," and then they go on to something else, but they don't sense the pain in my throat at having experienced the loss.
Right.
I slipped my psychologist hat on again. Forgive me. That's a difference.
I think I've seen people be that way.
And if it's severe, if it's severe enough where it displeases me, then I say they have a disorder.
Yeah.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Any memberships you care to mention? I got the ACLU and a bunch like that, you know. So what's on your mind?
There's I'm a precinct committee person, Democratic Party. I served as chair of the Democratic Party in Multnomah County for a few years, and I've been very involved in Toastmasters for a long time.
That's a challenge.
And you familiar with Toastmasters?
Oh yes, I was a member for a short time.
Yeah. Well, I serve I'm a member of two clubs, and then I attend a third one. The two clubs I'm a member of are Portland Toastmasters, which meets Monday nights at 6:30 at St. Michael's Church next to Concordia University. And then I'm a member of Portland Progressives Toastmasters, which is a club that I formed several years ago, actually about 11 years ago now. And that club I set up specifically to encourage people who are involved in progressive political issues to work on improving their speech communication skills. And that way at that club we could have people, encourage people to talk about political issues in the club. And then the third club that I attend twice a month is a club at the Columbia River Correctional Institution, which the inmates are members of the club, and it helps them to really develop their communication skills and their confidence, so that when they get released, they can have some confidence and some skills to become more productive members of society and not go back into prison again.
You think you have some effect on them?
Yeah, it definitely has.
Yeah, heroes, persons you look up to or admire from the past or alive today. Any names come to mind for you? I've been doing this a long time, and I've got some names that I've had from being small, and then a few I've stolen from others who given them to me.
Well, when I was growing up, the three people that always came to mind in our household as heroes were Martin Luther King Jr., John F. Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy. And Robert Kennedy was one that the thing that always stuck with me was, if he had not been assassinated, he would have been elected president, and he would have made a very different world from what we have. So I just think about what would have happened if Bobby Kennedy had been president.
Now, interesting, as you mentioned those three names, when you mentioned Robert Kennedy, there was a difference. There was the two mentioned you two mentioned earlier. There was a pleasant feeling, but when you mentioned Robert Kennedy, there was something more of a richness. It's hard. Feelings are a continuum again, but sometimes when feelings get so strong or so important, they don't register with an appropriate name. We're friend Lakoff again. He loses his name.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that you have that kind of reaction to Robert Kennedy is it's like me. It's think about what would have happened, what could have been, and we think about the loss of what there could have been. It's not just the fact that what he had done and what he had said and what happened to him, but what could have been.
Meaning, it can be again with some other human being who.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, another person that I really admire today, modern, current in office, Jeff Merkley.
Hey.
Senator Jeff Merkley.
Okay.
I actually knew him before he got elected to the legislature, and followed him, knew him all through his career, got to know him and everything he's working on. And I was so happy to see him elected to the Senate and everything that he's been doing since getting in the Senate. And just really appreciate him there and really admire him for how well he's been able to get in there and stick by his principles.
Have you had a chance to spend more than a couple of minutes talking to him?
Oh yeah,
Mano mano.
over the years, yeah.
What kind of a human being? His depth. That's a redundant question because I know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I think he's somebody that he grew up in Oregon, Southern Oregon and Portland, and just got to know what it really is like to be a person, a working class family in Oregon, and what it takes to keep the family together, to maintain, to generate the income, and to live your lives. And one of Jeff's mentor, when he was first elected into the legislature, Jeff's mentor was a guy named George Starr. You remember George Starr?
I'm new to Oregon.
George was an Oregon
new.
legislator in the 70s.
Okay.
And he, maybe even in the 80s, but I think in the 70s he was a legislator.
I got here in the early 90s.
But George is somebody who a lot of us who have been in Oregon for a while and got to know people like that, George was definitely a progressive hero in Oregon, and somebody that really wanted to see some good progressive issues put forward in Oregon, and that was he was Jeff's mentor, and Jeff, I think, has done a good job of following George's lead in really standing up for good progressive causes.
What's going to happen for him in the future, Merkley? Any idea?
Well,
Is he going to move up?
I keep joking that I'm going to print up some bumper stickers that say, Merkley 2020 president, and, or maybe Warren Merkley for Warren president, Merkley vice president, and I was joking about that. But then recently, there's been some more serious talk coming up about, well, maybe Merkley could be considered a presidential or vice presidential candidate. Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. So the time is slipping by, and we want time to talk about the other half of the show, other things that will come to mind for us more. So let's take a break for a few minutes before the director yells at me, okay? All right, looks like we are back, and I'm glad you stayed tuned. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we are talking about, yes, healthcare for all Oregon. I had to double check myself. Healthcare for all Oregon. And we learned about you personally because it's been a long time since you were on. And now I've got a few questions I want to ask you, but anything else you want to talk about to support the title of the show, any darn thing else, it works fine. What is the goal of healthcare for all Oregon?
Well, we want to see that Oregon has a universal healthcare system, and that'll either be Oregon doing it alone, which we might have to, or part of a national program. And the best of all solutions would be that the United States adopt a national healthcare plan, national healthcare single-payer plan that covers everyone in the country, and then we wouldn't need to worry too much about how do we make it fit in each state. But it's been so hard to get anything passed nationally, and even tougher right now, that we recognize we need to do it at the state level. We need to have Oregon adopt it. Several other states could adopt it. California's been trying.
They came close recently, huh?
Yeah. California came very close. They tried in Vermont, came very close in Vermont. There's part of the problem there was figuring out the funding mechanism and then how it fits with other states when you're dealing with multiple state funds. And then Washington has a big effort pushing for it. Colorado had it on the ballot recently, although the Colorado plan, one of the things that happened there was pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies dumped millions of dollars into a campaign against it. And that happened in Oregon in 2002. It was Measure 23. We had a single payer measure on the ballot in Oregon. Prior to getting on the ballot, the polling all indicated, yes, there's strong support for this. Get it on the ballot. Pharmaceutical and insurance companies dump millions of dollars against it, and it goes down in flames. One of the reasons that it didn't succeed that time was because we didn't have strong union backing behind the measure. This time we're working on really ensuring that we have strong union backing.
What about strong unions? There was a time when you met a strong union, you met Walter Reuther,
Yeah, right.
and those kinds of unions. But nowadays there's so many sweetheart unions. So what do you mean by strong union nowadays? I didn't think there were any
Well,
strong unions that have any
Well, I'm talking
significant
about the
influence.
unions backing it in a strong way. So
Okay,
the unions
okay,
would be supportive.
Okay.
And
okay.
we have a couple of pretty active unions in Oregon that are already
SEIU?
on board. Well, SEIU and AFSCME both do a lot of work in Oregon, and
Say what ASME is.
AFSCME is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees.
Yes.
So AFSCME is public employees.
Yeah.
And they recognize the need for this because a lot of the members of AFSCME are dealing with people on a daily basis who don't have health insurance. And so they're seeing the need for this, not only for themselves, their members, but for everyone in the public. And so AFSCME has been a strong supporter of healthcare for all. SEIU is getting behind it. They have both public and private employees, both public and private sector.
Say what
in their union.
SEIU is.
SEIU is Service Employees International Union.
Yeah.
And
How about the nurses?
And the nurses, nurses have been strong backers of
Very strong.
single payer health care across the country. The Oregon Nurse Association is just now getting more actively involved. They're not, they haven't been a big part of healthcare for all up to this point, but a lot of their members have been involved, and so a lot of their members have been working on getting the union more involved as well, and so that's coming up. In fact, there's another group that has formed as well that we work very closely with, which is called Nurses for Single Payer.
Mm-hmm.
And Nurses for Single Payer has been building up and bringing more people in together to really focus on the nurses supporting healthcare for all, single payer.
Sounds like you got a lot of juice behind you now.
A lot of what?
A lot of juice,
Oh,
a lot
juice,
of pressure.
Yeah, yeah. We have. Well, if you go to the website hcao.org, there's a menu item that says About Us, and there's a link that says I think it says members or coalition members, or it's just about the membership. And because Healthcare for All Oregon is a coalition organization.
Umbrella.
It's a coalition of a lot of organizations and unions in the state. And so if you look at that website, you'll see the whole list of, I think it's about, might be 200 by now.
Really?
There's a lot of different organizations that have joined. It includes some of the locals of various unions, as well as some church organizations, a number of church groups that have signed on as supporting members. There are some various community organizations around that have signed on. And so it's
the physicians and the pharmaceutical industry are going to have to spend a lot of money to overcome that.
Well, another group that we work closely with is PNHP, the Physicians for a National Health Plan.
Yeah, I belong to that one too.
Yeah, and PNHP is made up of a lot of doctors who want to see a national single payer plan, and they're working with us in Oregon as well, working on healthcare for all. And so PNHP has been a great supporter, and a number of those doctors in PNHP, of course, because they were involved with organizing the Mad as Hell Doctors.
And Sam Metz and
and so Mad as Hell Doctors is a great group, and they're actually talking now about pulling that back together to do some more activity as Mad as Hell Doctors. And they have a pretty good group of people, pretty good group of doctors. And in fact, this last weekend, I was tabling at a couple of different locations to get people to sign on in support. And for the Sunday Parkways, I was over by Woodlawn Park and tabling. People were stopping and signing a statement of support for Healthcare for All. And one of the people who stopped and talked with me a while and signed up for Healthcare for All is a cardiologist. And he said that, this is, as a physician, he's very interested in what can be done to make sure that everyone gets treatment. And he was also very interested in the PNHP, getting involved with that as well. So, yeah.
So it sounds positive. What's the chances of getting it in the next election cycle, 4 years or 6 years? How long is it going to be before we get it?
We're working on 2020. We're working on putting this on the ballot in 2020 to pass it in Oregon. The reason we're targeting 2020 is because it gives us enough time to ensure that we get the education out there so that people know what it is and are supportive. The support recently has just skyrocketed. Up until Trump's election, every time we would push to try to get single-payer health care, people would say, oh, well, that's a long-term goal, but it's not going to happen. It's a long-term goal. Yeah, I support that, but it's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because there's too much money against it.
Mm-hmm.
Now that Trump is basically torpedoing all the benefits of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act,
Yeah.
Obamacare,
Yeah.
now that they're trying to torpedo that, people are recognizing that, you know, we really need to take that next step. We really need to go to a single-payer system nationally, and we need to have that, because trying to piece it together the way we did before is not going to work.
And all of this because we have this black man who is the president of our white Christian country. Boy, the extent they go.
Yeah, right.
It sounds very positive, and I want to see it happen.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's
I
going
see
to
a lot
happen.
of support building. I see a lot of support building, and that's what I saw tabling this weekend. Was people in past years, we would stand there at the table trying to get people's attention. Please come, sign, support healthcare for all. And a lot of people would walk by. A lot of people, you know, occasionally somebody would actually stop and sign it. But yesterday, when I was tabling, people were just, they would see the booth and they would come running over. They would stop and say, I want to sign.
Yeah. Sounds good, boy. But do you think it'll occur in Oregon before we have a national plan that's in Washington being considered in the House of the Senate?
You know, it would be great if it would happen nationally. And one step forward that has happened now, of course, is John Conyers has a bill that he has submitted
Great
for
man.
years. He has submitted it, resubmitted it every session for years to establish Medicare for all. Well, this year, for the first time, a majority of the Democrats in Congress have signed on to co-sponsor it. A majority of the Oregon delegation has signed on to co-sponsor.
There's hope.
Yeah. And so there's movement. It's happening. Earl Blumenauer came out a couple months ago, said that he really wants to start pushing for single-payer health care, because he sees, you know, Medicare for all, that's really the way we're going to have to go. His thought was, he was saying it might take us 10 years to get there nationally. It could happen earlier. But we have a lot of momentum happening nationally. We have a lot of momentum at the state level. And the reason that we targeted 2020 for doing the ballot is because 2020 is the next presidential election year. There will be more people voting, and when we get more people voting, we get more people in support. And it gives us enough time to build that statewide campaign to ensure that we don't get crushed by the millions of dollars that come from the pharmaceutical company and the insurance industry.
What are you going to do about the pharmaceutical company and the insurance industry? Those are your two major opponents.
Well, that's what I was saying. Over this next couple of years, we have to be building up that knowledge in the community so that when the advertising campaign paid for by the health insurance industry, when that advertising campaign blasts all over the airwaves, people will already know in advance that that's not true. That healthcare for all is the way to go. You know, single payer is the way to go, and people will see this is the proposal, this is the plan, this is how to make it work. It's basically inoculate the voters against the negative attack ads.
Will it be successful against Trump's tweets? And to provoke you there.
Well, of course, we can use some of Trump's tweets to help our cause, because he has said in the past that Scotland had a great system. Scotland is part of Britain's national health plan. He has said Australia has a much better system than we do. Australia has a national health plan. Trump has said that Canada, that it works great, healthcare works great in Canada. Canada has Medicare for all.
But what else has he said to counter those things that, the many things that he said?
Right, right.
How can people support the cause? How can people do more than what we've talked about so far to support the cause that healthcare should be recognized as a human right?
Yeah. Well, one way is just educating themselves. There's our website, hcao.org, has a lot of information about how the current healthcare system works or doesn't work, and how single-payer healthcare system would work, and what the differences are, and how it works in other countries as well. T.R. Reid put out a great book.
Great book. What's the title of that again?
Healthcare Around the World. I believe that's right.
Yeah, I believe that's right too.
Yeah.
H.R. Reid, yeah.
T.R. Reid.
T.R. Reid, yeah.
And there's a great website PNHP has, Physicians for National Health Plan. They have pnhp.org. They have a tremendous website with a lot of information about how systems work and how a single-payer system would work. So that's one thing people can do, is just educate themselves so that when they're talking to others, they can have a good, clear understanding of it to let them know. And they can talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends, talk to their relatives, and let them know that this is really the way we have to go in the country and in the state. And they can help. They could go to hcao.org and click on a link to sign up to volunteer. They could click on a link to donate. They could donate a good amount of money. There's actually, I need to mention, there are two organizations. And they're partners on this. Healthcare for All Oregon is an educational nonprofit organization, and that's working to educate people about what the healthcare system is and what the options are for single payer. And then there's Healthcare for All Oregon Action, which I actually serve as the president of Healthcare for All Oregon Action. And that is the advocacy wing that will be building up for the campaign. And so that's the part that actually says, yes, we want these votes, we want these this legislation passed. And when you go on the website and click on donate, you can actually choose to donate to one or the other. And I suggest people donate to Action, because Action money can be used to support everything in the cause. If you need a charitable contribution credit, tax credit, then you donate to HCAO. But if you don't care about having to get the charitable donation credit, then donate to HCAO Action, because then we can use some money for any cause.
How long has that effort been going on? Action?
Well, we actually started building that up this last year, so we're kind of still forming how that will really work, and that will involve getting the legislation, getting the ballot measure written, and we're building that up so that we can really push the ballot measure.
You're going to send me an email, because my memory is about that long, and I'll send you some money.
Okay.
Because you got my email address.
I'll do that.
And I confess I'm guilty about my age, but I'm owning up my reality. I don't remember too well.
And a great thing to do is I'll point this out when I send you the email. Is on the website, when you click to donate, you can actually set a thing to donate monthly.
Wait a minute now. That's 2 or 3 of those I've still got going on. The ACLU, for example, Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yep.
Those are goodies, yeah.
Good.
Now we've got 5 or 6 minutes left to talk about whatever else you think would be useful to talk about. Anything else comes to mind, political, social, or whatever that you think would be of interest for you and I to talk about, for the viewers to hear our views?
Well, I would say if people are not paying attention to what their elected officials do in office, they really need to do that. And if you're not getting to know your elected officials and talking to them personally, you really should do that. And I say that because at the local level, city, county, you can readily find and talk to your city council or your county commissioner. And some people think, oh, they're in elected office, they're not going to talk to me. But most of the time, they really do want to hear from people, and they really do want to talk to people. And so they like it when people will actually contact them and talk to them. And legislators are the same way. Legislators really do want to hear from their constituents and talk with them about. And what you can do is, if you have a compelling story about what impacts you in healthcare and what impacts you in being able to pay for and afford healthcare, tell your legislator. You can share the story with Healthcare for All Oregon. We're collecting those stories together as well to help with the information, the education. But telling your legislator can have a good impact.
That's a good message.
Yeah.
And I guess once you've made that initial move in that direction, then it's easier to keep going and call some others, huh?
Mm-hmm.
In different levels of. It must be a tough life to be a politician anymore.
Yeah, I know a lot of them have a tough time. And I although when you say that, I do have to mention there was, after Jeff Merkley got elected to the U.S. Senate, and sometime later I was at a meeting where he was, and I was chatting with him after the meeting, and I said, Jeff, I just want to say I'm really proud of you. We're doing a great job. We're proud to have you there. And Jeff smiled. He said, Jim, I still can't believe I'm a U.S. Senator.
That's our man. That's our man. Yeah. What's Jerry Brown doing in California? Man, he keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Man, unreal. And as delightful as ever.
I don't know. I
rich.
Don't pay as much attention to California as I do to Oregon, but I do have a brother who lives there.
Uh-huh.
And
I say that because of the things that he's doing overall that you wouldn't think after all these years of the different governors in California.
Mm-hmm.
And he's pushing stuff that you wouldn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
So Moonbeam, you should take pride in Governor Moonbeam, reclaim it.
Uh-huh.
That thought came to mind. So what else should we tell the viewers about that would be of interest to you and I and to them, to have them become better citizens, more humane, and more enabling of those who are interested in making life livable for our citizenry?
Well, I generally say get to know your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
I try to. I don't always succeed, but
wear these signs,
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one isn't up there right now. Is be kind to even unkind people.
Mm-hmm.
If they need it most. I get more beautiful reactions to that one consistently all across the board.
Yeah.
And I must confess again to my viewers who heard me say this before, particularly in supermarket lines or someplace like that where there's always a little old lady who's got snowy hair and can hardly walk. Mm-hmm. And she sees the signs and there's a blink and she recognizes it. And then suddenly her eyes just melt and there's a smile. And occasionally you'll get a little tear. Oh, thank you. The gratitude's on their face and you can feel it,
Yeah, right.
Then I go away smiling for a week.
Well, one thing that I find helps a lot also is when somebody adamantly disagrees with you, to just talk with them. And we just talk. Sometimes we end up still disagreeing, but by talking, you develop that dialogue. And if you try to just tell somebody they're wrong and try to just strike them down and try to out-debate them, it generally doesn't work. But if you just be friendly with them, talk with them, and develop that discussion,
Yeah.
you can oftentimes either convince them to actually see your view, or you can understand their view, or the two of you can just agree to friendly disagreement.
And something can happen.
Right.
Something can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm aware of the time, and something's going to happen if you and I don't stop talking, and they're going to yell at me from the control room. But anyhow, let's take about 30 or 40 seconds to say anything you want to the viewers, and look at that camera there. Anything that comes to mind right now. What we talked about this evening, or anything else, something you forgot, or just...
Okay, well, I'll say first of all, go to hcao.org and click on the statement of support and sign up to show your support for Healthcare for All Oregon, for universal healthcare, so everyone gets covered. You can go beyond that. You can click on, you can sign up to volunteer, you can donate, but that's the first thing, is just giving a statement of support. And then I would say join Toastmasters, learn how to be, give good presentation.
And learn to stop before they yell at me from the control room. You have a public service announcement that you want to put up there before we quit guys? The American Civil Liberties Union, they know that's my favorite announcement. The ACLU, our civil liberties are what our country is grounded on, and they need protecting. And they're in jeopardy right now because of the present administration. And the next one is in the corporate personhood. We're in serious trouble now because of that. We need a constitutional amendment that says corporations are not persons and money is not speech.
That's right.
So go to that website, and thanks for watching, and I'm glad you did, and I hope you enjoyed my guest Jim Robinson as well as I did. See, I said it right this time. And we'll see you next time. Remember KFC.